It's 2026 and there are people that think that if I'm copying from artist A, I'm cheating. Nobody wants to be known as a thief. Nobody wants to be known as that person that is stealing another artist's work, because there's this label of like artists that steal from each other and things like that. It stops a lot of artists, especially beginner artists, from actually utilizing one of the, well, I say one of the best tools that has actually been invented. And I would say it's a technique that people have been using for hundreds of years. Like, people, whenever they want to learn and they get a tutor, a master artist, they use this tool, and that is simply copying. It's basically copying with the intent to learn, the intent for education, and not copying with the intent for deception. There is a huge difference, especially as a beginner. There's a difference between copying to understand and then copying to actually deceive people. I remember when I was learning to play the keyboard, right? I even tried learning to play the guitar, but I even bought a guitar, but that didn't work out well. Yeah, there's just not enough time in the day to just concentrate on learning that kind of thing. But I remember when I was learning to play the keyboard when I was quite young, and I was learning the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. I was learning about chords, I was learning about scales, I was just learning the basics, right? And I never got past the amateur, or I call it the intermediate phase. But a lot of the time during those lessons, right, during those 30 minutes, 1 hour lessons, a lot of the things we were learning were already established chords, were simple basic chords that were around. Like, in the church, there were these popular songs that were being sung, and they would like tell me the chords to play, tell me like what I need to do in order to play them. So essentially what I was doing was that I was trying to imitate rhythm, I was trying to imitate timing, I was trying to imitate technique that already existed. So I was not like trying to produce an original song right from scratch. I was trying to copy what already existed, what people already like, and trying to replicate it, because it's something that people enjoy. It's something that that is regarded as the standard in terms of creating good music, and I was trying to imitate that. And that's the same thing that should be applied. That's the same ideology and the approach that should be applied whenever you are drawing. You have taste generally, you know what you are inspired by, you know what you enjoy doing. Like, you shouldn't try to just create something right from scratch, like from imagination, right from start. As an artist, as a beginner, what you should be doing is looking at all these fun things that inspired you and trying to copy them, trying to learn from them. We as human beings are creatures of influence, right? Like, the languages we're speaking, we're not the ones that invented it. Like, the expressions we're using, like, we are products of our parents. In fact, we are just duplicates of our parents, like just different versions of our parents. Like, the languages we are speaking, every single word that is coming out of our mouths, like even the expressions, like gesticulations, we learned from something, we learned from someone. The humor we have, imitation is how humans learn. And art is no different. The way I got decent at making comics personally is that I actually started from just copying like drawings on cartoons, right? Like action poses. You can always translate that to comic book. Like, I always copied action poses. I always copied superheroes, like dynamic angles. I didn't really know the words for all those type of things, but I just copied those drawings, and that was how I learned, and that was how I got familiar with drawing both a full superhero pose and drawing characters in different angles. And then eventually, when I actually started working on comics, what I then did was that I would study comic book pages. Like, I would use them both as references, and I would copy them a lot of the time. The difference is that I'm not copying for the sake of, oh, I'm copying this artist so that I can present it as my work. A lot of the times, there's a way you can copy an artist, right? Different figures. You can copy an artist, different figures. Let's say you could pick like 3 different artists and copy and take probably the position of the arm from this artist, the position of the leg of this artist, and the angle of the drawing from this other artist, and then fuse them together as one drawing. There's a way to copy, especially if you're someone that has gone from beginner level to a level where you're actually creating your own original art. You can be inspired by 3 different artists and then create something new. But once you're starting, you don't have to worry about that. What you need to focus on is developing skill, is developing muscle memory. What you should be focusing on is solving artistic problems and building your experience. You should be trying to copy, like understanding those basic fundamentals, right? Of course, like you need to understand things like how to do good anatomy by copying good anatomy. You need to understand how to replicate good composition by copying good composition that already exists, because the masters, like the people that we consider the masters, that we put on this pedestal of like they have great skill, they've been at this for a very long time, they know what is what. Those guys learned by copying, first of all, and they've already solved problems that already exist in our heads. Like, we are like, how do I draw this? How do I approach this? How do I go about this? How can I think creatively? How can I approach? Like, all those things you are having, somebody else has already solved it. They've already solved the problem multiple times in different ways with different approaches. So it's your job as an artist to copy those instead of like suffering yourself stuck in your room under your table worrying about the facts that somebody random online is going to say that you actually stole from this artist. If you are being honest about it, if you are coming out and saying, I did this, I got the reference from this guy, I copied from this guy, and you're not like just putting it out there, say, hey, this is what I did, and presenting it as if you didn't copy from anywhere, then you know, of course, people could argue that you're actually stealing a lot of the time, especially if it's like identical. If you are just doing it with the intent to learn, I'm learning from this artist, I copied this pose, this is what I've learned, and you're honest about it, that's what matters. The difference is, the problem is not in the copying, the problem is when people are dishonest about it and trying to like take all the glory for themselves. Whenever you see a dynamic expression, right, or character in a dynamic pose, and you sit down to actually study it and break it down and draw it, what you are doing is that, not literally anyway, but you're sitting down with that artist and having a conversation about how things work. You're building your observation. You are taking note of artistic choices and whether or not you want to pick from that artist, pick that thing from that artist. And that's how you build this thing known as artistic style. Once you choose not to sit down with all this work, like once you choose not to copy when you're starting out, you're essentially choosing to ignore centuries upon centuries of experience and solutions that people have already presented themselves. And then you are just, it's basically foolish is what I'm trying to say. From the Michelangelo to the Pablo Picasso to the Da Vinci to the Rembrandt to the Jim Lee to the to the Damoras to the Jorge Jimenez to the Takehiko Inoues, all of them copied from someone, all of them got some of their styles and influences from different artists that already existed before them. And now this current generation is also learning from them the same way the generation to come is also going to learn from us. But if you don't properly settle down to learn from what these guys already have to offer, you won't progress and develop at the pace and the speed that you should. The thing about these studies is that you do something for a long enough period of time, it becomes part of you. You learn to think like that artist. Once you've done something multiple times, you've drawn arms the same way David Finch has drawn arms multiple times, you begin to see, oh, usually David Finch would add, the thing David Finch would do with this arm is that he would add this extra layer of black or this extra hatching around this area, but I choose not to do that, right? You begin to understand how the artists think, but you will be like, okay, David Finch wouldn't do that, but Jorge Jimenez, he would probably just add a grayscale around that, and you say like you probably prefer to do that. And that is how you are fusing all these different artist knowledge and their abilities together. And it's the same thing with writing, it's the same thing with music. Like whenever you're starting to learn music, you don't just start by singing your own song. You start by singing songs that you like, that you've heard on the radio or from Spotify or whatever you get your music. I even see this with actors like on TikTok. A lot of the times what they are doing is that they are not just working from their own original script. A lot of the times you see them you see them reciting lines from movies that are actually popular to us. These masterpieces are sort of like, they already exist in space. They're sort of like, copying them is like having an instructor, looking at them as an instructor, even though they don't need to sit by you one-on-one for you to be able to learn from them. That's why I do these things where I do studies. I've already picked a group of artists that I like their artwork, and then I settle down. A lot of the time I do live streams of them where I just sit down and I just try to replicate their work. But a lot of the time what I do is that I try to do it using my own characters that I've already created, so that whenever I am actually drawing in my comic, working in my comic, I can actually be able to replicate those artistic decisions in the comic, right? So that I can then eventually formulate my own style. But I've already sat down to study this group of artists over and over and over again. And the more I do that, I'm not saying I've done that to the level where, you know, I'm seeing it more often, but, you know, I am seeing changes and improvement. But what I'm trying to say is that once you sit down with this artist work over and over and over and over again, you begin to think like them. You begin to say, oh, okay, he would do this, but I choose not to employ every single thing that he would do. I choose to employ like 10%. I choose to employ like 15% of this decision that he would make. The problem about copying again is that a lot of the time when people start out, they just copy one artist. They just pick one artist and they copy them. No, you pick a group of artists. Once you start copying just one artist, you just become like an imitator essentially. I'm not saying, even though like you can just pick one artist and copy them, and then like what the same thing I said with percentages, right? You could be like, the thing is that you won't really achieve that art style that is truly yours. I think you'll be limiting yourself a lot if you're just copying from one artist. But once you have a group of artists, you pick the way this artist draws hair, you pick the way this artist draws nose, you pick the way this artist draws muscles, you pick this unique dynamic angles that this artist has, you pick this unique composition, the way this artist applies composition, you pick the way this artist draws fight scenes in comic book panels, you pick the way this artist does cover art. Like, you pick from different artists, and all of a sudden you have this unique style. Now the problem that will happen is like when you become a master and then somebody else just goes and copies you directly. No, that is not how it works. They pick from you, then they pick from another artist and pick from 5 or 10 more artists, and that is how new art style is being formed. And that's why you see different art styles here and there. They exist because they've picked from previous artists that they admired, and they've learned, and then they've been able to simplify and have their own artistic choices. And that is how it works. There's nothing wrong with copying this, like, especially as a beginner. What you should be worrying about is developing reps, improving, right? In doing enough volume, like putting out as much quantity as possible, and being honest about every single study you do. There's this thing that happens like when you're starting out, like you just have this ego where you just do something and you don't want to talk about like how you actually, you don't want to talk about the fact that you're a beginner. There's nothing wrong with that. Where the art world is going to haunt you, and rightfully so, where people are going to catch you and squeeze you like they are squeezing cloth, is where you trace someone else's work and you post it online, like as and claim that it is actually your own work when genuinely it isn't. So that's just what I wanted to share for today. If you're a beginner artist, copy as much as possible. You have your favorite artist, copy their work, copy it as much as possible. Preferably do it in black and white, because color can be very tricky and it's quite annoying. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to share today. Stay creative, guys, and have a lovely day.